What it do? Citizens of P-Town, you know what this is. This is none other than my JRPG tier list. Gonna say it right here in case I haven't said it before, but JRPGs are my favorite video game genre of all time. I love JRPGs. This is such a great genre of video games to play and sink so much time into. About 7 or 8 games out of 10 is going to be a JRPG. I tend to be biased towards the modern genres, but I also have love for some of the classics. So I don't consider myself like an expert. These are 70 games. This does not include every single JRPG I've ever played. This is mainly games I've either beaten or played long enough to have a full opinion over. And I'm not including JRPGs that I only played for a few hours and then dropped immediately. But otherwise, we have 70 games to go through. So let's get through this tier list. It looks like this tier list place them in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with A for Atelier Ryza. Now, this is a long-running franchise, specifically the Atelier games, a JRPG franchise with a lot of alchemy-based gameplay and various levels of combat. Atelier Ryza, I'm going to put in the C tier. I got this on a sale. I think I paid $25 for it. I would say it was worth $25 for the 60 or so hours that I put in. Things that I liked: exploration was pretty fun. I thought that the alchemy mechanic was very deep, pretty complex. It really encourages the player to experiment with collecting the different materials and items and to craft different things, right? And these materials can then craft other things, whether or not it is weapons, armor, or story items. That I all liked. Story, combat, it was kind of okay, not the most memorable, but like I said, probably worth buying on a sale. C tier, I would say okay, worth buying on a sale if you're interested. Next up, we have a little indie darling, Chained Echoes. I'm going to put it in the A tier. Chained Echoes was excellent for those who are familiar or who aren't familiar with this game. Chained Echoes combat is turn-based combat, in which there are 4 players in your party and you attack the enemies, right? But then there's this bar at the very top of the screen with 3 different colors. And depending on which moves you do, will move the gauge in a certain direction. And the goal of the combat is to keep your marker in the green, I believe. And then certain moves that say if it has moves up in the corner, if you follow those same type of attacks, it moves it to like the left. And then if you do anything other attacks, then you have to move to the right. So it was encouraging. It was like an extra layer of turn-based combat in which you have to try to stick within this like happy medium, find this balance, and so that did elevate a lot of the battles very well, even if the gameplay did get repetitive after a while. Story is a type of story that does grow on you. After a bit, didn't really like it most of the time, but by the end, I really got into the story. But Chain Echoes, man, the fact that this was made by like what, one person or a small team of people, fantastic indie game. Definitely check out Chain Echoes. Such an amazing throwback to the classics. And yeah, Chain Echoes, amazing. Next up, we have 2 big ones. We have Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger. I'm going to go ahead and put both of them in the B tier. I, of course, have respect for Chrono Trigger. It's one of the greatest and most influential JRPGs ever made. I didn't really grow up with it. I played it in adulthood, thought it was good. Don't think it's as great as a lot of people would consider it to be, but like I said, I don't deny its greatness. And Chrono Cross, while a big departure from Chrono Trigger stylistically, I thought the gameplay was very interesting and unique. The whole slots mechanic, in which it was turn-based combat. There's a lot of different, I wouldn't say a lot of different rules, but there's different restrictions as far as how much you could attack, and then the whole slots and placing different moves and different layers of attack. It's very interesting. It's going to take too long for me to describe when we have 70 games to go through. But I think both these games are very unique, and I think they both have their place. Of course, Chrono Trigger is more iconic, but if you've played Chrono Trigger and you love Chrono Trigger, haven't played Chrono Cross yet, I would say give Chrono Cross a shot. It's not going to be the same as Chrono Trigger, trust me, but definitely something interesting there. All right, we have the first. Oh, I was gonna say the first. I was surprised that this was the first Dragon Quest game on here, but we have some others later. Dragon Quest III Remake is an A tier. It's fantastic. I adore the Dragon Quest franchise. It's one of my favorite franchises ever, and of course, this remake was excellent. Not only it is a visual improvement to its predecessor, but a lot of the day-to-day life improvements and accessibility that makes it a lot more fun. It fleshes out the story a bit more than Dragon Warrior 3 was, and just a perfect remake. Is it my favorite remake of all time? Probably number 2 or number 3. It is a fantastic game. Came out recently. A lot of people really loved it, including myself. Dragon Quest, we're going to talk about it more, so I'll leave it at that. We have 2 card-based JRPGs, which is Dragon Ball Goku Denetsu, as well as its sequel, Harukanaru Denetsu. I'm going to go ahead and put Goku Denetsu in the C tier, and then is B tier, and then sequel in the C tier. Once again, I can't go into full detail of its gameplay, but if you're into card-based combat, right, and like different, like a card system, a card game, these games are Dragon Ball's attempt at that. I remember liking it as a kid. I was able to figure it out. I was able to understand the mechanics. I did pretty well in the game. I was maybe like 7 or 8 when I played these games, and so if it makes sense to a young Preston, then I think it's worth something. I think the sequel wasn't really as good, but Goku Denetsu follows a lot of the narratives from the original series. I recall like early Cell arc being one of the big arcs in this, as well as the original Saiyan arc. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time thinking about it. It's good. They're good games. Next up, we have another franchise called the Disgaea franchise. If you're familiar, this is a pretty grindy, pretty anime-esque JRPG franchise with tabletop. It's a strategy RPG with tabletop maps and combat. You know, you place your characters in certain places. You can move them throughout a map, attack enemies from different angles and from different distances, etc. And it's, like I said, known to be a very grindy game. So on the tier list, we have Disgaea 1 Complete, Disgaea 5, and Disgaea 6. I'm going to go ahead and put, in order of my favorite from least favorite, Disgaea 5 in the A tier, Disgaea 6... Disgaea 6 and Disgaea 1 in the C tier. I'm leaving it at that. How do I explain this? Disgaea 5 was amazing. I put about 90 to 100 hours into the game, and for a game that's so grindy, it still did not get old for a long time. And there's just something about the design of the maps in Disgaea 5, the characters, the story, the animations when you attack different enemies with different abilities. When you're grinding out a game that, like I said, is pretty grindy, is kind of repetitive, little details such as liking your characters a little bit more and liking the animations and seeing the same animation over and over and over again. Just having it being a bit more polished, like a Disgaea 5, goes a long way in compared to Disgaea 6 and Disgaea 1 Complete. Disgaea 6, I didn't think the maps were as fun. It does kind of negate some of the problems with Disgaea 5, in which it made grinding a little bit easier, but for the most part, the story was okay, the maps weren't really fun. And then by the time I played Disgaea 1, which was the third Disgaea game that I played, with Disgaea 5 being my first, I was a little bit burnt out in the series, and to kind of go from Disgaea 5, which made a lot of improvements since Disgaea 1 Complete, and then to kind of go back to where it all started, it just became pretty old. I became pretty burnt out on it. But Disgaea 5, if you're interested in like a grindy game, if you like your strategy RPGs, I think Disgaea is a good franchise to get into. Specifically, I would say enter at number 5. Some people say just start with number 1. I think that's also good as well. I think the reason why 1 is at C is because I did play 5 first. Next up, we're going back to Dragon Quest. So Dragon Quest Builders 2. This is, if you haven't heard of this, is kind of like a Dragon Quest meets Minecraft. Although the mechanics and gameplay between Minecraft and Dragon Quest Builders 2 are different, it does take the same concept in which you are going out, you're gathering materials, you're building contraptions. When you place certain blocks and certain materials in a certain way, they create these structures that have these specific functions. You can build houses, you can build farms, you can build pools, towers, barracks, kitchens, etc. It's a really fun game, to be honest. It was a lot more fun than I thought it would be. And we've all played Minecraft before, and I'm willing to bet that most of us, if not all of us, do love Minecraft. So to say that a Dragon Quest like Minecraft game was up my alley, I mean, it absolutely is up my alley. So it's a pretty fun JRPG. I'm thinking about going back and replaying it. It generally was fun. Like I said, if you like your sandbox games, you like your Stardew Valleys, you like your Rune Factories, and you just so happen to like Dragon Quest, go ahead and check out Dragon Quest Builders 2. I hope they make a sequel. They're probably not. Dragon Quest Heroes is a hack and slash spin-off. This is not a part of the mainline game, but Dragon Quest Heroes 2 is a hack and slash. I'm gonna put it at the C tier. I think that while I love the feeling of adventure that you get from Dragon Quest Heroes, of course you get the classic Akira Toriyama designs. Of course you get the amazing music. The hack and slash gameplay was good, but the balance with the dungeons and the combat was not very good. Sometimes the combat would be way too easy. Sometimes the bosses would just be hell sponges, which I think is such a lazy thing to do when it comes to bosses, especially when it comes to hack and slashes. And then just navigating the terrain of some of these dungeons, sometimes it's like you had to go from one side of the map to another, and it would take you minutes just to walk, and your character is just like running really slow, and you have like this timer like counting down the back, and the maps weren't fully balanced, so not the greatest game. We better pick it up here. Dragon Quest VIII, Journey of the Cursed King, is an A tier. I haven't beaten this because I played this when I was a kid, so I didn't fully understand this game, but I remember loving it when I played it. It's a part of the reason why I kept playing Dragon Quest into adulthood. I could talk more about Journey of the Cursed King, but I have more to say about Dragon Quest XI. It's one of the best traditional turn-based games. I was blanking out on the name here. Echoes of an Elusive Age, of course. I didn't want to confuse it with the name of another JRPG, but Dragon Quest XI is my favorite Dragon Quest game. To me, it's the best traditional turn-based JRPG, and definitely top 5, top 3 modern JRPGs. I mean, everything, such great story, a great cast of characters, just finely polished turn-based combat. Dragon Quest at its most pure and its most polished. Phenomenal character designs. Did I say great music? Then I'll say it again. Great visuals. It is such a well-rounded JRPG. And like I said, for something that's very traditionally turn-based, it is like one of the best out there, if not the best. Okay, so next up we have the first 3 Dragon Quest games for, well, initially known as Dragon Warrior. I'm going to put the first Dragon Warrior... Actually, I'm going to put the first 2 Dragon Warriors at a B tier and Dragon Warrior 3 at an A tier, just because Dragon Quest 3 is like one of the first classic, in my opinion. I mean, if you know that I love the remake, so of course I love the original. And in the case of Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, the first game was a little bit too simple. It's fun, it's casual, you can beat it in a day. And then Dragon Quest Warrior 2 is still fun, but the difficulty was not polished at all. I mean, if you know, you know. The developers just didn't have time to fully polish the difficulty, so it just, at some point, it's just impossible to beat in some areas. But I still prefer Dragon Warrior 2 over like FromSoft games, to be honest, when it comes to punishing difficulty. But I'll put those in the B tier. Next up, we have Dusk Diver. This was a pretty low-budget indie hack and slash RPG. I'll put it at a C. It didn't really have a lot of assets. Once again, I'm not trying to put it down just because it had a low budget, but it was very noticeable. There was maybe about 4 character designs across the entire game, only a handful of combos they can do across the characters. That's about it. Nothing really much else to say. It had potential. I heard the sequel was disappointing as well, but decent game if you like your hack and slash JRPGs. Now, we have Final Fantasy VII, both the remake and the original. I said it at the beginning of the video, I'm not going to consider myself the leading expert on JRPGs. For me, the Final Fantasy games are B tier. I'm sorry. Maybe an unpopular opinion. I think they're good games. I never grew up on them. I never grew up on the original Final Fantasy VII, so my mind wasn't blown when I was younger. And playing it as an adult, I liked the story quite a bit, and the characters, maybe not wowed by the gameplay. Sorry. But once again, B tier is still a good tier. I like the games. I appreciate the games. I've played a few of the Final Fantasy games, and I would say they're both on the same level for different reasons. I found the story in the original just more tight because it is like one complete story in one game. But of course, in the remake, it has great visuals. I do like the action combat, and it does expand on a lot of the characters. So I think they're good games, just not my franchise. Final Fantasy has never been my franchise, but I respect these games. I enjoy them. Next up, we get a couple Fire Emblem games. I'm going to go ahead and put Fire Emblem Engage at the C tier and Fire Emblem Three Houses at the S tier. I'm going to say that Fire Emblem Three Houses is my favorite favorite Switch game of all time. I haven't played hundreds of Switch games, not gonna lie, but still, I would say Fire Emblem Three Houses is my favorite Switch game. I love the strategy combat. I love the social simulator mechanic in which you play as a teacher and you're teaching these students. You're kind of going through the curriculum. You're helping them out with their tasks. You're completing side quests. You're bonding with your students, and then to see that bond reflected on the battlefield and in the story, absolutely fantastic game. I love this. I want to replay it soon. And in the case of Fire Emblem Engage, even though it is a lot like Fire Emblem Three Houses, at least it tries to be, it's like a half-baked version of Three Houses. Like when it came to like Three Houses was like my entry into Fire Emblem. For me to want to play the sequel, Engage, I didn't need it to be like Three Houses. I know that Three Houses is very different from the rest of the Fire Emblem games. With that said, I didn't need Engage to be like the sequel, but if it was going to be like Three Houses, I didn't want it. I wouldn't have wanted it to be the half-baked version that it was. So that's why I put it at C tier. Not nearly as fun when it comes to the gameplay, the social simulation elements, the calendar system, etc. So yeah, put it at C tier. All right, we got two big ones right here. Falsifiers Champions, and you know what? Fuck it, I'm gonna put Falsifiers at A tier as well. Like I said, if you know me, you know that these games mean a lot to me. These were some of my earliest exposures to JRPGs, and if you're not familiar with the Falsifiers games, it is a monster capturing and battling game. So like a Pokemon, for example, like that's it, you know, like a Pokemon, you already know most of the gameplay. But for me, this was a lot like Saturday morning cartoons, right? I was about 9 to 12 years old when I played these games. When these games came out, I, of course, like a lot of boys my age, watch Saturday morning cartoons. These games are like your Saturday morning cartoons, where you can go out, your characters are kids, you go out, you capture dinosaurs, you battle them against other people, you fight against these enemy factions, you save the world, you get into these weird, bizarre situations like you would in a cartoon. Like in Falsifiers, the original game, you're befriending this ghost pirate at the bottom of the ocean, and he's just going crazy, and he's just like, all right, let's fight with Vivisaurs. And it's just like, you're just like, what the hell is going on here? But I love these games. These are such formidable games for me. Formative JRPGs for me, and hence they are going in the S tier easily. Hopefully there will be sequels for the Switch too. Not really optimistic about it, but I'd be here for too long talking about these games if I were to stay here. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to couple Mario JRPGs. We have Bowser's Inside Story, I'm gonna put at a B tier, and Partners in Time at a C tier. Here, I played these when I was a kid. If you're mad that I put Partners in Time at a C, I'm sorry, I don't remember it as much. Bowser's Inside Story was fun because I remember at the time I was playing this, I was learning about the human body. So to kind of have a little fun spin where Mario and Luigi are inside Bowser's body, and they're like, they're like, what do you call it? They're like, they're messing up the biology functions of Bowser, right? They're going into his stomach, they're digesting his food, they're going to his heart, they're pumping it faster, they're everywhere. It's a fun little story, educational. Meg's Monster, I'm gonna put it at a B tier. This is a story-driven game about a young girl who befriends a monster, and the turn-based combat in the game is not necessarily beating the other opponent, but rather not beating your opponent into submission, because Meg kind of serves as this inhibitor, this restrictor in combat, in which you can't make her too upset for whatever reason. So you have to choose your moves accordingly. So pretty interesting, very story driven, but still very fun. Metaphor ReFantazio is a recent JRPG, a new franchise from Anilist. I'll put it in the A tier. This came out last year, won a few awards at the Game of the Year awards. Because it's so fresh in people's minds, I don't think I need to go into detail, but this is a fantastic game. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, it probably was my Game of the Year 2024. So I'm not putting the tiers in order. That would take too much time. I'm just going to place it in order of appearance. So Metaphor ReFantazio, like I said, I probably preferred it over Dragon Quest 3 2D HD remake for Game of the Year 2024, but fantastic game, A tier. Moonlighter. This one's tough because I'm thinking either A tier or S tier. I'm gonna put it A tier. Moonlighter, for those who aren't familiar, it's essentially a bit of a roguelike RPG game in which you go into caves. It goes by a calendar system, so at night you would go into caves, you would explore, you would kill enemies, collect materials, collect items, and then in the daytime you would sell those items, right? Whether or not it's like rocks or enemy drops, things like that. And what's cool about that game is that you get to set the prices. You get to throw out there any price that you want, and you have to gauge based on the reaction of the customers whether or not you overpriced the item, whether or not you sold it for like totally cheap and could have sold it higher or just right. And so every single day was like a little test to see like, okay, I'm gonna put this thing at this price and see how they react. Oh wow, they reacted really well. That means that I put it too low. I could put it a lot higher. And just getting money every single day and becoming rich, slowly becoming rich throughout the game, is such a satisfying mechanic. So definitely recommend checking this out if you haven't yet. Next up, we have Naruto Path of the Ninja games. I'm gonna put them at the A tier. Naruto nostalgia, turn-based combat. Don't think I need to say anything else. Neo the World Ends With You is up next. I might have to put it at a C tier, to be honest. I think that no, who am I kidding? It's a B tier. I don't think it's great. I think that the combat is fun, but it did get repetitive. And the story I didn't really get into until like the last 5% of the game. So fun franchise. Might play the original at some point, but pretty good game. Sorry, my I got teams. Workers call me. Ni no Kuni, I'm going to put at the C tier. I think that while the visuals was really good, the story was very heartfelt. It tugged at the heartstrings, and of course the music is fantastic. I think that the combat was kind of okay. It just ended up being repetitive and not really dense in my opinion. Octopath Traveler is a polarizing. They're both 1 and 2. They're a little polarizing to me because on one hand, I think that every time I start it for the first 10 or 20 hours of both the games, I'm like, these are such fresh JRPGs. They feel so new and so unique. I love the visual style. I love the music. I like the characters. This is just such a unique JRPG. And then the next 10 to 20 hours, there's an immediate drop off where I'm like, all right, it's really repetitive. All right, I'm just going on autopilot through all the chapters until I get to a boss battle, and it's only at the boss battle at the end of every chapter is when I actually enjoy the game. So they're a little polarizing for me. With that said, I'm gonna put them at a B tier because I'm just gonna judge them by their prime. At least when I like them the most throughout my playthroughs, and when I like them the most, I think for the most part it would be at the B tier, even considering the huge drop off, and I end up coming away from the game just like ready to drop it. But yeah, Octopath Traveler, very good. Still might play the third once. I'm still gonna support it though. Okay, next up we have a bunch of Persona games. Let's just throw these all out there. Persona 3 Reload, S tier. Persona 4 Golden, S tier. Persona 5 Strikers, A tier. Persona 5 Tactica, C tier. Persona 5, S tier. Any questions? 3, 4, and 5, fantastic games. Persona is one of my favorite JRPG franchises of all time. I'm not here to try to start a war about which one is the best. I will say that Persona 5 is the most important to me, and so because of that, yes, I would consider it the best, but that's not to say that Persona 4 Golden isn't an S tier perfect JRPG, and that's also not to say that Persona 3 Fez or Persona 3 Reload, perfect S tier JRPG. They're all great, okay? Not here to get into a war. I love them all. Love them all, but Persona 5 is my favorite. It is the reason why. Persona 5 is the reason why this tier list came to exist. Because Persona 5, 1, revitalized my interest in the JRPG genre, in which when I played it at the time, like early college, it had been years since I last played a JRPG, and so this was the first one in a long time. And 2, it propelled the genre to the JRPG genre to become my favorite in all of video games. Since Persona 5, I've been trying to reach the same high of combat, of dungeon crawling, exploration, of social mechanic, of style of music since Persona 5. So I love this game. I'm not saying that Persona 5 is my favorite JRPG of all time, but it is why it's on the thumbnail. It's in why it's like the main image of the list. But like I said, I just going on a tangent there. Persona 3, 4, and 5 are perfect games. So we'll leave it at that. Persona 5 Strikers, I love hack and slash games too, so a Persona game that's also hack and slash is up my alley. And Persona 5 Tactica, unfortunately, did fall short when it came to tactical RPGs. Moving on, Pirate 101 is an MMORPG. I am cheating a little bit because it's not really a JRPG, but this is my tier list, so it's an S tier. One of my favorite games ever. I think that it's important to me. I love the games, and I love the game. I've played it multiple times, and pirates. What do you guys say? Okay. All right, so let's talk about the Pokemon games. I, just like everybody else, are a huge fan of Pokemon. Play them as a kid, like I said, like a lot of people. My thing with Pokemon is that I do love it as a franchise. So that means in addition to the games, I also love the TV show. I also love merchandise. I love different spin-off games and different media of all different kinds when it comes to Pokemon. What I'm getting at here is that I was never actually an expert or super deep into the games. Not that I didn't play them, but with the Pokemon games being among the first games that I played, I was like 7, 8 years old. Meaning I was still not only just learning video game grammar of paying attention to dialogue, paying attention to hints and cues, and remembering the layouts of maps and areas and callbacks to certain people or other areas and where locations and things like that. I'm also still learning how to read too. That was all as I was playing the most of the Pokemon games that I played. So I don't have any Pokemon game as like among my favorites of all time, but of course I look back at them very fondly, had fun playing all of them, nostalgia for a lot of them. So I'm gonna put pretty much most of them in the B tier. I think that I just have best memories with Fire Red as well as Pokemon Pearl. Those are just the ones I have the most nostalgia for. So there you have it. I mean, once again, maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but just want to say that when it comes to my knowledge and my love of Pokemon, it's not really from the depth of my familiarity with the games. Like I said, I played them pretty much entirely when I was a kid. I do want to go replay at least some of them this year. I don't know which one yet. Maybe you can leave your suggestion in the comments of which one to replay. But Pokemon Black, Pokemon White, Pokemon Emerald, Leaf Green, and Platinum are going to be in the B tier. I'm going to put Fire Red and Pearl in the A tier. That's just what I remember. Next is Rune Factory. It was okay. It wasn't really that good. I know that this ended up building a franchise, as well as, it being related to Harvest Moon. I think that's a respectable franchise, but when I played it, didn't really enjoy it that much. I think I just need a little bit more. Sea Stars is an A tier, another indie darling like Chained Echoes. It is just a love letter to the classic JRPGs that inspired it. Gorgeous visual style. I love the story. I love the lore that was built throughout the game. Admittedly, not the deepest in terms of turn-based combat, but still very fun. It was my game of the year, and I think it would have been 2023 when it came out. So yeah, there you have it. Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, I'm gonna put it at a C tier. I know that die-hard JRPG fans are gonna try to crucify me for saying this. Here's the thing, it's a little bit tedious. Not gonna lie. I think that when it comes to my approach to what I want from gameplay, I'm not really looking for something that's like super challenging, super punishing, or like I said, very tedious. I liked it. I think it's a decent game because you get to get an early glimpse of what Persona would eventually become. But for the most part, I did play this game as kind of like as a Persona fan and kind of need to understand, like I said, where Persona came from. Just not my type of game. I do prefer Dragon Warrior 2 just because I love the style of Dragon Warrior and Dragon Quest. But Shin Megami Tensei, it was an essential playthrough, but not one that stuck around in my head. Nor did I really have fun per se. I was actually pretty mad a lot of the times playing the game. Like, oh, I just missed a move. Guess I gotta start the whole battle over. I just traveled this extremely long distance, not having saved within 20 minutes, and now you're gonna throw a mystery boss battle who's this freaking matador. Not a lot of good memories made in this game, to be honest, but still decent. Stick of Truth, I'm also going to put the same. I think that it is. I'm not personally a fan of South Park, so maybe that's why it's this low. But it's a funny JRPG. It's funny. Yeah, one of the funniest on this list. Stardew Valley is a nice cozy game. Don't really need to go into too much detail. A lot of people love this game. Is this a JRPG? I just realized I put this in here without because there's a JRPG. Whatever, it's my tier list. People like Stardew Valley. I'm here to give it its flowers. It's a good game, fun game. Tales of Vesperia is not my thing. When I played Tales of Vesperia, I really liked the voice acting. The voice acting just had a lot of the cast had so much inflection in their voices. Their lines and their dialogue are so well rehearsed, so well lived in. They definitely practiced when it came to their characters. But the combat, it got old super quickly, and the exploration was also kind of okay. I'm sorry. Recommend me some Tales games if you're interested. I haven't played Tales to Berseria yet, so that might be next. Tokyo Mirage Sessions, or I guess it's like the extended edition, or whatever you call it, the FE Encore. I think it was a pretty fun game. I think that if you're familiar with the Persona games and the baton pass mechanic, as they call it, Persona 5, and other games that where you kind of attack, other Persona games where you hit enemies' weaknesses and then you get the chance to attack again, whether or not it's through the same character in your party or a different character. Tokyo Mirage Sessions takes that aspect of the combat and expands upon it to the point where that is the core aspect of the gameplay. The point of the Tokyo Mirage Sessions combat is to try to chain together as many follow-up attacks as possible. In the beginning of the game, you have to set up your attacks and your party members' abilities to complement each other to kind of follow up automatically. In the early game, you're going to try to get 2, 3, maybe 4 follow-up attacks at a time. But by the end of the game, each time you attack with one party member, you have to hope that you have 12 follow-up attacks coming set up in your party, or else you're going to lose against the bigger bosses. And I personally really like that combat. When it came to story, when it came to characters, not really that interesting. I think that while being an idol in Japan is a very interesting and dense part of the culture there, just how it worked in the game wasn't really interesting. Like, I can't relate to becoming an idol. I mean, look at me. Anyways, good game. Very good game. Tokyo Xanadu X. This is a Nihon Falcon game, which is essentially an attempt to make a Trails game alongside an Ys game. So it takes the hack and slash combat of Ys while having the same high school setting and world building of like a Trails game. And that does seem really fun on paper because I love both these franchises, and I'm just about to get into them in a second. It didn't really work out. I thought the story creeped up on me. I didn't really get interested in story until like the last boss fight, or like at least until the ending. But the story is kind of okay. The social mechanics were okay, and the hack slash combat is like an inferior, less polished version of the Ys combat. So, like I said, on paper, this seems like the perfect game for me, but didn't end up being such. It kind of fell flat. The Trails from Zero games, I think, are Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure are very good games. I really enjoy them. I think that I prefer these two games with Lloyd Bannings over the Trails of Cold Steel games is that they are tighter games. Like, they're 40 hours, 30 hours. It just gets straight to the point when it comes to the story. You meet a majority of the characters at the beginning of the game. There is no drip feeding when it comes to the story. It is a tighter narrative with the same turn-based combat. With that said, I love all the Trails of Cold Steel games. I love all of them. I think that there's just something about the gameplay in which, if you were to say Trails of Cold Steel is like Persona without the heart, I'm not going to entirely disagree with you on that. I don't think the social mechanics are on the level of Persona. I don't think that the turn-based combat is necessarily on the level of a Dragon Quest XI or a Fossil Fighters Champions. With that said, there's just something about everything when it comes to the fun turn-based combat, when it comes to the characters, when it comes to the story. The Trails of Cold Steel games are kind of like comfort games for me. I wouldn't say they're comfort games in the same way that Moonlighter is to me, or Stardew Valley, or Pirate 101. But every time I play a new Cold Steel game, or not a new one, but every time I played one for the first time, I felt at home. I just got into such a rhythm super easily, and I loved making progress in the game. I usually 100% the games, outside of the fishing stuff. I did all the side quests, all the secret quests. I got all those points on that grade system. If you played these games, you recognize it. I got the highest grades. I do enjoy the turn-based combat too. Something about the formula of these games I just feel very comfortable with. If I had to pick a favorite, it would be Cold Steel 2, just because it's not as long as the first 3 games, and yet still has a bunch of payoff, and it is a tighter narrative. It is like Azure and Zero, kind of straight to the point when it came to the gameplay or the story. It didn't overstay its welcome. Of course, I still loved 1, 3, and 4, and I put at least 90 hours across each of those games individually. But I think Cold Steel 2 is my favorite just because it was tighter. But Cold Steel is genuinely one of my favorite JRPG franchises of all time. So yeah, I really love Nihon Falcom because of these. I mean, once again, you don't have to agree with me. It's just how my brain works. I just find myself at home with the progression, with the story. Not to say that the story is super great or anything, but I like its presentation. I like the structure. I like the chapters. I like the build up over a long period of time. I think these are games that are just for me. But there you have it. This is the Valkyria Chronicles. Not my thing. When it comes to strategy RPGs, I think I prefer other ones. That's about it. Nothing else to say. Russell Quest also was a pretty disappointing game. This came out in 2022, 2023. Like professional wrestling, but as an RPG, seems perfect, but I think it kind of fell flat. Oh boy, I'm just like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a D tier. I'm sorry. I love the music. I love the visual style. I love the cutscenes. I like the characters. Something about the combat wasn't really interesting to me. I think I need to go play a definitive edition. I feel like this is going to be the one that gets me in the most trouble. But there you have it. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's just not my thing. I'm not calling it a bad franchise. This is the first Xenoblade game that I played, and it just ultimately ended up not being my thing. So sorry about that. Yakuza Like a Dragon, my first Yakuza game that I finished. I'm gonna put it at B tier. It's fun, it's wacky, it's entertaining. It does get repetitive, but as someone who is a huge fan of Gintama, this is kind of like a Gintama for JRPGs. It's just like I said, it's bizarre at times, it's wacky, it's wild. Yeah, fun game. Next up is actually this is the last franchise on this tier list, Ys franchise. I think that overall, I do prefer the Ys franchise over the Trails of Cold Steel. When it comes to tiers, I think putting it on tier list, it is pretty competitive. So I'm going to do Ys Origins at B tier, and I'm going to do Ys 9, Monstrum Nox at A tier, Ys 10, Nordics at an A tier, and then Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Donna at an S tier. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. I mean, as I said before, I do love hack and slash games. Hack and slash genre is also one of my favorites. So when you take a JRPG hack and slash, Ys is like probably my favorite JRPG franchise that is JRPG hack and slash. I'll say Ys 10 and Ys 9 are all great. I think their exploration is fun. I think their stories are pretty good. Like I said, action is fantastic. Ys 8 was just the perfect blend of not only the most fun exploration, my favorite exploration of the franchise, my favorite characters, and probably the best story. No. Definitely the best story. It is easily my favorite story out of all the Ys games. And not to say that it's the best story on this tier list, but like I said, compared to the other Ys games, for sure I love the story here. So I think that Ys 8 has the best of what Ys 10 has, which is the combat, while also having a lot of what Ys 9 had, which was like really great exploration. So yeah, there you have it. And Ys Origins is kind of like a more simplified version of it, so to say. But yeah, okay. So there you have it. This is my tier list of JRPGs. We got a lot of great games in the S and A tier. These aren't all like the RPGs I played, because once again, I just included specifically JRPGs with a few exceptions. But yes, this is my tier list. Let me know your favorite JRPGs down below. I know that I'm missing a lot of classics. Go ahead and tell me about your favorite JRPGs. Thank you all for watching this video. Thank you for all the support. Here's to 2025. Thank you for watching. I'll catch y'all later.